Now I've set up a 4-player game, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the setup initially and then get into the gameplay focusing on one particular nation. As I previously said, this is a 4-player game, so the rules will change for 2 and 3 players. However, the gameplay will not change, just on the way that the modular board is set up, and then some of the resource tokens that are initially began are put into the pools. Now, as you see here, it is a 4x4 grid with the neutral tiles face down and the home tiles face up. Each of the players is going to take their capital city and place it on the arrow that you see here. This is the suggested area. Now, you can place it on any of the 4 central areas. Just to note that if you cover up something, you cannot use those resources. You only get resources from the ones that are on the outskirts of your building. Each player is going to start with an army unit on one of their outskirts and a scout unit on one of their outskirts. And the next thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the trade that their outskirts provide. This one provides 3. So they would simply turn their dial to the 3. The next thing they do is they look at their card and they do whatever it says on it. The Chinese start with a capital that has walls around it. So they have a 16 bonus instead of the 12 that most players start with. They start with despotism, so they put that face up that you see there. That is their starting government. And they start with a starting tech of writing, which they go through their tech deck and they take that and they put it down face up to form their base of their pyramid tech. Very easy to understand, very easy to learn. The next thing, each of the players is going to randomly take 1 infantry, 1 artillery, and 1 mounted unit from the shuffled decks and put it on their side. These are called their standing forces, which they will use for combat when their armies engage in combat with each other or with barbaric villages. Very easy to understand. The next thing that each player is going to do is they are going to take their cultural markers that you see here and put it on the starting turn marker. Now, briefly, I'm just going to show you what each of these starting nations start with. They're all a little bit different. The Chinese are going to start with despotism and a walled city. The Americans start with despotism and a great person, of which they have placed right here. Great people act just like buildings. They give you different kinds of resources. It's a very nice starting condition for those. However, just like buildings, they cover up whatever tile that they are on. The Russians start with something a little bit different. They start with 2 armies. One of them is designated by this white army you see there. They also start with communism, which is a different kind of government which gives you different kinds of benefits. The Germans start with, as we see here, despotism as well, but they have an ability to draw not only 1 from each of those kind of units, but 2 more infantry units. So they start off with 5 infantry units, that there are 5 total army units that they can use in the game. That's how the game sets up. 1 person is randomly decided as the first player. We're going to go through this as the Chinese player, introducing each of the turn phases. So let's dig right in. The game can be won in 4 different ways. The first way is an economic victory. On your dial, as I previously shown, there are 2 tracks, one to show you trade and the smaller one to show you coins. If you, any time during the game you were to ever accumulate 15 coins, you would win an economic victory. The second way is to win a cultural victory, which is done by the track at the bottom of the market board. If a player were to get to the end of this track, they would win a cultural victory. The third way is to win a military victory. If you ever are able to conquer one of your neighbors' capital cities, you would win a military victory. The last way to win is to build a tech tree and have the 5th and final tech card, which is the space flight. It is a level 5 tech. There is only 1 of these cards in the game. If you should ever build it, you would win the game. Those are the ways to win. The course of the game takes place over 5 unique turns or phases on each round. Now, 2 of these phases are done simultaneously. 3 of the phases are done in turn order. I have seeded the cards here to show that the Chinese player is the first player, and there are 3 different things that actually happen on the first phase, called the start of turn. On the start of the turn, you would look at any cultural cards that you possess, and this is just an example. If you were to have this card in front of you, it has a start of turn action, which you would take. The second things that can be done is you can build a city. Building a city is simply taking one of your city tiles and placing it over one of your settlers. There are a couple conditions that have to be met. Number 1, you cannot have any enemy things around you. So for the Chinese player, which is yellow, they cannot have an enemy marker in the outskirts, so they cannot place. If this is gone, they still cannot place for a second reason. There is a hut here that has not been revealed. If this is removed from the game and someone goes here and explores, they could build. Why? Because it's not in water. They have 8 areas around them, and they are not touching another city's outskirts. What does that mean? If they were here, they would share the same outskirts as their capital city, which means that they could not build. You can also not build if you are next to an unexplored region. You have to have 8 physical areas around you. So if they should wish to build and all these conditions are met, they simply remove the settler from the board and place it on their side of the table, and they take this city marker and place it on one of those areas that the settler was. And now they have built a secondary city. The last thing they can do on the start of turn actions is simply change their government. They have to have the technology researched in order to change it, and they simply change it to whatever side that of the government they've researched. Now there is an anarchy rule in the game. I'm not going to explain it, but it simply states that if you don't change it on the turn that you learn something, you have to have a phase of anarchy, and it kind of screws up some of the mechanics of what you're able to do on a turn. That is the first phase. It's called Start a Turn. The second phase of the game is called Trade, and Trade is very simple to explain. It's a very quick turn. Everything is done simultaneously, so all players will take this action at the same time. The very first thing you do is you look at your city's outskirts and you count how many trade are around them. So there's 3 around this city for the Chinese player, and then this one has 6 trade. So this provides a lot of trade. You add those 2 together, you have 9. You also look at any settlers you have on the board. They provide trade back to your cities as well. So you would have 10 total trade. You would add that on your dial. You would go from 3 trade up to 10 trade. Extremely simple. That's done simultaneously for all the players. The second thing that can be done during the trade phase is an open negotiation. You can talk across the board. Everything is out in the open. You can trade resources. You can trade unspent culture tokens between players. You can trade even culture event cards. You can make non-binding promises. I won't attack you if you give me this. Lots of stuff going on. It's a very cool part of the game. They've captured the influence and the emotion of what the PC game is like. That's trading. Very simple. The third phase of the game is one of the most extensive, and it's called City Management. There's a lot of things that go on, and it's done in turn order. There are 3 possible things that a player can do for each one of their cities. Each of their cities is allowed 1 city management action out of a list. What can a city do? Well, they can build a unit, figure, building, or wonder. What are those? Building a unit simply means paying a production value for that unit. So say their capital city wants to build a unit and they want to build an infantry. It costs 5. They look around the outskirts and see how much they have. This one produces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're allowed to build an infantry unit, which they would take the infantry unit and place it into their standing forces. They can also build buildings. Buildings also have costs. Now they have to be built in specific areas, and you have to have the technology card in front of you that allows you to build that building. Very simple. You can build wonders. Wonders all have production costs as well. This city here produces 9 total, so they could build one for 9, which they don't have. The lowest that they have is 10. You cannot share production between 2 cities. Each city does their own action at one time. Well, if they only have 9 production around this city, how can they get more? Good question. What they're allowed to do on their turn is they're allowed to turn back their dial 3 spaces for each production. So if they need 2 more production, they go down 3, and then they go down another 3. Very simple. They add 2 production, and then they would be able to get this Stonehenge wonder. That is a good way to enable to get production quickly. If they decide not to build any units or wonders or buildings or even figures, they can decide to devote their city to the cultures. What they do is they add 1 culture token for each city. So if they have this city and they want to devote it to the culture, they get 1 culture token plus 1 for anyone that's around them. This one has a culture token around them, so they would take 2 of these culture tokens and place it on their side. They're allowed to expend these at any times to buy culture cards. All the culture cards here cost 3, all the ones here cost 5 plus 3 trade, and all the ones here cost 7 plus 6 trade. It gets expensive, but the culture cards are well worth it. The last thing they're allowed to do is harvest resources. For each city, you're only allowed to harvest 1 resource. Even if you have multiple resources around you, you can just harvest 1 of them. Therefore, this person can harvest iron. Resources are very hard to get, and they're very valuable because they power your tech cards. Most tech cards have icons in here, which mean that you have to power them with something. For instance, this one does take iron. To use it, you have to power it. That is city management. There's a lot more little things you can do, but it's very robust. A lot of the main gameplay mechanics take place in this, and it's a really fun part of the game too, because you actually feel like you're building up your city. So let's stop there and go right into phase 4. Movement is the fourth phase of the game. It's very simple. At the beginning of the game, each player is allotted a travel speed of 2, which can increase as the game goes on through tech cards. You're allowed to move as many of your units as you so wish, up to 2 spaces. You can never move through water unless you've learned a technology that allows you to do so, such as aviation or sailing. If a opponent's army ever moves into your settler, you will lose that settler. It simply cannot initiate combat. Likewise, these can never move into a village or a hut. Armies, on the other hand, can initiate combat. They can move into huts and make negotiations, or villages and initiate combat. You can also use one of your movement speeds to flip a tile that you see here. Now, I will try to get into combat if I have enough time. If I don't, I apologize for that. Let's move on, though, to phase 5. The last phase of the game is called Research, and it is my favorite part of the game for a couple reasons. First, it's done simultaneously, so all players will take this action at the same time, which really reduces on the amount of downtime in the game. The second reason is that you really get a good sense of your civilization building up from one turn to the next. Although all the players have the exact same technology cards, how they decide to develop that civilization with their tech is what really makes the game unique. In order to do so, players are going to have to build a technology pyramid. At the start of the game, they'll start with one level 1. In order to build a level 2, they're going to have a foundation of 2 cards underneath it. The same with a level 3, they're going to have 2 foundation level 2 cards underneath it, until they get to the level 5 card, which is the space flight, which is another one of the winning conditions in the game. In order to build or research a technology, you're going to have to expend some of your trade value that you see here on this dial. Now, in order to build a research card, you're going to have to expend your trade. To build a level 1, 2, 3, it's going to cost you 6, 11, or 16. So these numbers represent what level of the technology you're trying to build. However, you're going to expend all of the technology to build it at the end of your turn. So if you build a level 1, you're going to go to 0. If you build a level 2, you're going to go to 0. You cannot build a level 3 because you're not that far up on the dial. There is a way to save some of this trade value. If I were to build a level 1 or 2, I would be able to I could only go to a 5. And the reason for that is that I have 5 coins. It will save you that much coins on your thing. It simply retains it. It doesn't add to it. It simply retains that much trade value. It's a wonderful mechanic, and it works really well. It's kind of hard to explain why it works so well, but it does. This game is Civilization. It really is. They've taken all the elements of the PC game and jammed it into a board game. I'm not sure how quite they did it, but it works. It really feels like Civilization. This is coming from someone who's played almost all the Civilizations minus the first one. It's really well done. The production values are great. You get a real sense of the wonders, the great people, the movement, the settlers, the armies, the battles. The combat is fantastic. This is a huge step above the last couple games of combat they've had in the FFG game line. Now, there's cultural wins, there's military wins, there's economic wins, and there's technology. I mean, this is purely Civilization. It feels like it. It's a long game, so know that you're going to be invested in a while, but this shouldn't be anything new to anybody who is sat in front of a computer for 3 to 4 hours a night or even longer trying to build up a tech tree. Wonderful game, beautiful components. They've captured purely the essence of Civilization. I highly recommend this game.